Neighbors. While in Europe and America gardeners wait months for their first harvest, Japanese farmers are already harvesting the third generation of vegetables from the same bed. While we rejoice over a handful of tomatoes, they yield tens of kilos from an area barely larger than a parking space. And while our soils become impoverished year after year, forcing us to resort to fertilizers, fight pests, and spray against diseases, their soils become more fertile, their plants healthier, and their harvests more abundant. This is no coincidence. It's not a secret reserved for a select few. It is knowledge refined, tested, and perfected over centuries. Knowledge that you too can start using today. Because Japanese farmers' methods are not complicated, do not require expensive equipment, do not demand years of training. They are simply different, fundamentally different, and precisely for that reason, they work extraordinarily well. In an era when food prices are soaring and a simple grocery trip becomes a financial strain, where supply chains are increasingly fragile, and we've seen how quickly empty shelves can become a reality, where dependence on industrial agriculture is more dangerous than ever. This knowledge is not just valuable, it is vital for survival. It is the difference between dependence and freedom, between uncertainty and self-determination, between hope and knowing. If you watch this video to the end, you will understand why a small garden can produce more than a large field if managed correctly. You will learn why the way we farm in the West is inefficient and how you can change that. You will discover techniques that can triple your yield without having to invest more time. If true independence is important to you, if you want to know how to get more yield from less space, if you want to understand why your garden hasn't produced what it could so far, then subscribe to this channel now. Leave a like so the algorithm shows this knowledge to more people. People who need it, people who are willing to learn and act. And stay until the end, because in the end, everything comes together into a system that can change your life. A system that not only works but improves year after year. We need to take a step back to understand why Japanese methods are so revolutionary and why they are more relevant to us today than ever before. Japan is an island nation with extremely limited arable land. Only about 12% of the country is suitable for agriculture. The rest is mountainous, steep, forested, or urbanized. Imagine you had a country the size of Germany, but only the area of Bavaria was suitable for cultivation. And on that area, you had to feed not just one family, but millions of people. That was the reality Japanese farmers faced for centuries. There was no possibility of expansion, no new fields to clear. The only option was to get more out of what was already there, or starve. This existential need gave rise to a system based on absolute efficiency. While European farmers could rely on infinite fields, while American farmers expanded westward when the soil was depleted, Japanese farmers had to develop intensity instead of expansion. They had to learn to use every square centimeter, to optimize every growth phase, to respect every drop of water, to utilize every bit of organic matter. From this necessity arose a culture of precision, observation, and constant improvement. A culture that considered waste a moral failure and efficiency the supreme virtue. This need has given rise to a system that is more relevant today than ever, because we, too, no longer have unlimited space. We also face the challenge of doing more with less. The average size of gardens and orchards is shrinking, land is more expensive, urbanization is increasing, and at the same time the desire for self-sufficiency, independence, and the security that only homegrown food can offer is growing. Precisely here lies the key. The methods that Japanese farmers developed out of necessity are precisely the methods we need today to thrive in a world of increasingly scarce resources. The first principle that Japanese farmers masterfully dominate and that makes the biggest difference is the total utilization of space and time. It sounds abstract, but it is concrete and measurable. Let me show you what it really means. Neighbors. While a typical European gardener plants a bed in spring, tends it in summer, and harvests it in autumn, a Japanese farmer works in shifts, in waves, in continuous cycles that overlap and reinforce each other. Imagine you have a 2 square meter bed, 2 by 1 meter, a tiny area. The average gardener might plant 4 tomato plants there in May and wait 3 months for the first harvest. In those 3 months, the bed produces nothing. It grows, yes, but it doesn't yield food. That's 3 months of wasted productivity. The Japanese farmer thinks differently. They plant the 4 tomato plants, yes, but between those tomatoes, they have already planted lettuces that will be ready to harvest in 4 weeks. Between the lettuces, they plant radishes that are ready in 3 weeks. On the edge of the bed, they sow spring onions that can be harvested in 5 weeks. Under the tomatoes, where there will later be shade, spinach or mizuna grows. These are plants that even grow better in partial shade than in full sun. What happens now? After 3 weeks, you harvest the first radishes. You have fresh vegetables on the table while the tomatoes are still small. Immediately, you sow new radishes again, a second generation. After 4 weeks, the lettuce arrives. You harvest it and in the same spot, plant pak choi or arugula. These are fast-growing plants that tolerate the shade cast by the growing tomatoes. After 5 weeks, the spring onions are mature. You pull them up and plant basil, which protects tomatoes from pests and can later be used for pesto. After 6 weeks, the second generation of radishes is ready. Now you might sow cilantro or fennel. Do you see what's happening here? The bed is never empty. It produces constantly. And when, after 3 months, the tomatoes are finally ripe, you have already harvested 6 different types of vegetables from that single small bed. You've harvested radishes twice, lettuce once, spring onions once. The spinach is still growing. The herbs are thriving. And now, in addition, the tomatoes are starting to produce. A Western bed would have given you nothing in this time. A Japanese bed has already fed you for weeks. This is successive planting, and it's why a small Japanese bed produces 3, sometimes 5, times more than a large Western field. It's not about size, it's about utilization. It's about understanding that time is as valuable as space, that an empty bed is a wasted bed, that every week without growth is a lost week. But space is only half the truth. Time is the other half, and perhaps it's even more important. Japanese farmers don't think in seasons, but in waves. They don't plant lettuce once in spring and then wait until the next year. They plant a new row every 2 weeks, a small row. 15 plants, no more. 2 weeks later, another row, then another, and another. This means they don't harvest a huge amount of lettuce all at once in June, only to have no more for 3 months. They harvest continuously. Every week there's fresh lettuce. Every day there's something new. The garden doesn't work with explosions, but with a constant flow. This doesn't mean additional effort. In fact, it's less effort if you do it well, because instead of harvesting 50 lettuces in one day, 30 of which will go bad, because you can't eat them that quickly. You harvest 5 fresh lettuces every week, just what you need. No waste, no losses, perfect freshness. And the time invested, 10 minutes every 2 weeks to sow a new row, that's all. 10 minutes for a continuous supply. It's not more work, it's smarter work, and this mentality extends to everything. Beans are not sown once in May, but in 3 waves, May, June, July. This way you have fresh beans from July to October, instead of an excess only in August. Carrots are sown in stages, radishes, of course. Even tomatoes can be staggered. Early varieties and late varieties, varieties for July and varieties for September. It's not quantum physics, it's simply another way of thinking. And it is precisely this mentality that makes the difference between a garden that supplies you for 3 months a year and one that feeds you for all 12 months. The second principle is intensive soil care through living composting. And this is where it gets really interesting, because here Japanese methods fundamentally differ from everything you've learned so far about composting. In Japan, there is a centuries-old tradition called bokashi. The word translates as fermented organic matter, but that doesn't do justice to the technique. Bokashi is not simply compost, it is something totally different. Neighbors, it is the fermentation of organic waste with effective microorganisms. And this technique transforms kitchen waste into the most potent fertilizer you can imagine in a few weeks. Let me explain why it's so revolutionary. Traditional compost is generated by decomposition. Organic matter is broken down by bacteria and fungi, a process that takes months, sometimes a year. Heat is generated, gases escape, and in the end, you get humus. Humus is good, no doubt, but the process is slow, and during decomposition, many nutrients are lost, either evaporating or leaching out. Bokashi works differently. It's not decomposition, it's fermentation. Anaerobic fermentation like that of sauerkraut or kimchi. You take your kitchen scraps, layer them in an airtight bucket. You sprinkle each layer with bokashi bran, which is bran inoculated with effective microorganisms, and then you close the bucket. What happens now is microbiological magic. The microorganisms begin to ferment the material, not decompose it. This means all nutrients are preserved. Nothing evaporates, nothing leaches out. The material doesn't degrade, it transforms. After about 2 weeks, you open the bucket, and what you see looks almost identical to the original waste. But it smells acidic like sourdough and is full of life. Full of lactic acid bacteria, yeasts, photosynthetic bacteria, microorganisms that not only fertilize the soil, but also activate it. The crucial difference lies in the microbiology. Bokashi is not simply decomposed material. It's full of living microorganisms that activate the soil immediately once you incorporate them. These microbes break down organic matter in the soil at a record speed. They make nutrients available to plants, nutrients that would otherwise be locked up, and drastically improve soil structure. Studies have shown that plants in bokashi-treated soils grow up to 4 weeks faster than with conventional compost, 3 to 4 weeks. That's the difference between 2 harvests per season and 3 harvests per season. That's the difference between self-sufficiency and dependence. Imagine your soil as a stomach. You can give it dead food that digests slowly. That's traditional compost. Or you can give it living, pre-digested food that acts instantly, brings life immediately, and releases energy on the spot. That's bokashi. Bokashi is the probiotic for your garden, and best of all, you can make it yourself at home, in the kitchen, with materials you already have. You only need an airtight bucket. 20 liters is enough for a household. You need bokashi bran, which you can buy online or make yourself, and you need your kitchen scraps. All vegetable scraps, fruit scraps, coffee grounds, tea, even meat and dairy products that you would never use in traditional compost. You put the scraps into the bucket in layers about 5 centimeters high. You sprinkle them with a handful of bokashi bran. Press everything down well to remove air and close the lid. Next layer. More bran. Close again. After 2 weeks, the bucket is full. Now let it rest for another 2 weeks, and you're done. After a total of 4 weeks, you have finished bokashi. You bury it shallowly in your garden bed, about 10 centimeters deep. Cover it with soil, and in 2 weeks, it will be completely broken down and integrated into the soil. The microorganisms spread, multiply. Transform your soil into a living organism, and your plants literally explode. You'll see it. You'll be able to measure the difference. But bokashi alone isn't enough. Japanese farmers combine it with a second technique, little known in the West but just as important. It's called continuous layered mulching. Instead of applying a thick layer of mulch once a year and waiting for it to decompose, Japanese farmers constantly add thin layers of organic matter. Today a little mown grass, next week shredded leaves, then straw, then perhaps coffee grounds or tea leaves. Always small amounts, thin layers, continuous input. Why is this so powerful? Because this constant input keeps the soil alive. Microorganisms need food. If you give a large amount of mulch once a year, they eat it all and then starve until the next year. If you give small amounts continuously, they always have food, stay active, multiply, and generate humus. And the more active these organisms are, the more fertile your soil, the faster your plants grow, and the healthier they are. Continuous mulching has other advantages. It keeps the soil moist, even in heat. It regulates temperature, cooling in summer and warming in spring. It suppresses weeds because their seeds don't receive light to germinate. It prevents erosion in case of heavy rain. Neighbors. It protects the soil structure against compaction and looks good. A well-maintained and mulched garden has an aesthetic, a calmness, and an order that are immediately apparent. Japanese farmers go so far as to select mulching material specifically according to need. Straw for strawberries because it keeps them clean and retains moisture. Cut grass for more demanding plants like cabbage because it decomposes quickly and provides nitrogen. Wood chips for paths because they decompose slowly and offer structure. Leaves for beds with hedge shrubs because they encourage fungi that create symbiosis with the roots. Nothing is casual. Everything has a reason, and each reason is based on centuries of observation and experience. The third principle is the art of dense planting without competition. And this is where things become truly counterintuitive, because everything you've learned so far tells you that plants need space. If you go to a Western vegetable garden, if you open a gardening book, if you read the instructions on a seed packet, you will always see large distances. 30 centimeters between tomato plants, 15 centimeters between lettuces, 10 centimeters between radishes. This is recommended so that each plant has enough space, receives enough light, and can extract enough nutrients from the soil without competing with its neighbors. Japanese farmers think radically differently. They plant so densely that the leaves of adjacent plants almost touch. Tomatoes are not 30 centimeters apart, but 15. Lettuces are not 15 centimeters apart, but 8. Carrots are not thinned out, but left dense, almost in bunches. At first glance, this seems like competition, a struggle for resources, a mistake. But it's the opposite. It's cooperation. It's synergy. It's the creation of a microclimate in which all plants grow better than they would separately. When plants are close together, they shade the soil between them. This shade is golden. It prevents moisture from evaporating. In a hot summer, that can make the difference between surviving or wilting. It suppresses weeds more effectively than any chemical product because their seeds don't receive light. It protects the roots from extreme heat that can kill soil life. It creates a cool, humid, and stable microclimate just above the soil, precisely where most nutrients are absorbed. Plants don't compete. Together, they create the conditions under which all grow better. Very few grasp this. It seems paradoxical, but it's biology. Studies have shown that densely planted beds produce more per square meter than those planted with space, even if individual plants are somewhat smaller. 10 small lettuces yield more than 5 large lettuces in the same area. 20 medium carrots weigh more than 10 large carrots. It's not about the size of the individual plant. It's about the total yield of the area. But dense planting only works if you choose the right combinations. And here comes the next element, perhaps the most important of all, polyculture. Japanese farmers never plant a single variety in a bed. Never. A monoculture bed doesn't exist in their mindset. They combine plants that support, protect, and complement each other. Deep-rooted plants alongside shallow-rooted plants, so they utilize different soil layers and don't compete for the same water. Nitrogen fixers alongside demanding plants so that some provide what others need. Pest-repelling plants alongside vulnerable plants. This is not an esoteric concept. It's practical biology, it's chemistry, it's ecology in action. Let me give you concrete examples. Beans fix nitrogen from the air. They have bacteria in their roots that transform atmospheric nitrogen into an assimilable form for plants. If you plant corn next to the beans, the corn benefits. It receives free fertilizer directly at the roots. The corn in turn offers support for the beans to climb. Its stable stalks are perfect for climbing bean varieties. If you also plant squash underneath, its large leaves shade the soil, retain moisture, and suppress weeds. Its prickly leaves deter pests. This is called the Three Sisters. A method that, by the way, was not only perfected in Japan, but also among the indigenous peoples of America for centuries. The principle is universal and works in a measurable, reproducible, and reliable way. But Japanese farmers go a step further. They have turned polyculture into a science and an art. They deliberately plant aromatic herbs among their vegetables. Basil next to tomatoes. Why? Because basil produces essential oils that repel aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworms. Neighbor's chives next to carrots. Why? Because chives confuse the carrot fly, whose larvae would devour the carrots from the inside. Cilantro next to cabbage. Why? Because cilantro attracts hoverflies that eat aphids, which would otherwise attack the cabbage. This sounds like magic, but it's chemistry. Plants communicate through aromatic substances. sending chemical signals through the air, and from root exudates into the soil. These signals can attract beneficial insects or repel pests. They can warn or strengthen neighboring plants. If you learn to understand this language, if you start to see your garden as an ecosystem and not just a collection of individual plants, you can create a garden that protects itself, fertilizes itself, and regulates itself. A garden that functions like a forest, like a meadow, like any natural system that has thrived for millennia without human intervention. The fourth principle is water management through observation and precision. And this is where beginners are separated from masters. Water is life. Without water, there is no harvest. Too little water and plants wilt. Too much water and roots rot. Water at the wrong time and you encourage fungal diseases. Water at the right time and you double your yield. It's both simple and complex. Japanese farmers don't water according to a schedule. They don't water every morning at 7, regardless of whether it has rained or the sun is beating down. They water according to need. It sounds simple, but it's a skill that takes years to perfect. It demands observation, careful and constant observation. They walk through their garden every morning, not just once, but slowly, calmly. They touch the soil, feel the moisture, observe the plants. If the leaves hang limp, they need water. If the leaves are stiff, there's still enough. They smell the soil. Dry soil smells different from moist soil. They know that difference. They observe the weather, not just today, but tomorrow and the day after. If it's going to rain tomorrow, they don't water today. If the next few days are going to be hot and windy, they water deeply today so the roots have reserves. They know that a tomato plant on a hot and windy day needs twice as much water as on a cloudy and calm day. They know that lettuce has shallow roots and needs small, frequent amounts, while tomatoes have deep roots and prefer large amounts less frequently. They know that too much water is as harmful as too little, perhaps even more so, because excess water expels oxygen from the soil, and without oxygen, roots die. And they use techniques that keep water in the soil instead of constantly watering. That's the key. Not just watering, but efficient watering. Not using more water, but making better use of it. One of these techniques is drip irrigation in its simplest form. Instead of spraying plants with a hose, which wastes water, wets leaves, and encourages fungal diseases, Japanese farmers bury porous clay pots in the garden bed and fill them with water. The water slowly filters through the pores of the clay and supplies the roots directly where it is needed. Without surface evaporation, without waste from runoff, without stress to the plants from humidity changes. This method is called ala irrigation and has been used for millennia, not only in Japan, but also in the Middle East, North Africa, and all places where water is scarce and valuable. It saves up to 70% of water compared to conventional irrigation. 70% is enormous and encourages deep root growth because roots follow the water and grow downwards. Where it's cooler, where there are more nutrients, where the structure is more stable. Plants with deep roots are more resistant to drought, heat, and storms. They are healthier, more productive, more long-lived. This is crucial, but water alone is not enough. Japanese farmers understand that how water reaches the soil is as important as the quantity. That's why they mulch heavily. As I've already explained, mulching is a barrier to water. It prevents evaporation. On a hot summer day, evaporation from bare soil can be 10 liters per square meter. In mulched soil, perhaps 2 liters. That's the difference between watering daily or watering once a week. That's why they build their raised beds slightly elevated. Raised beds have better drainage. Excess water flows away instead of pooling. Waterlogging is the death of the plant. Raised beds prevent this. That's why they aerate the soil regularly, but never deeply. A shallow scarification, only the first 5 or 10 centimeters, breaks the soil capillaries. These microscopic tubes through which water rises from the depths and evaporates. Neighbors. If you break those capillaries, the water stays below, where the roots need it. Digging deeply destroys the soil structure, kills earthworms, disrupts fungal networks, and kills microorganisms that do not tolerate oxygen. Japanese farmers work with the soil, not against it. They only disturb the surface, just enough to introduce air, but not enough to disturb soil life. This gentle care improves the soil every year. It doesn't worsen it. However, the fifth principle is the efficiency of tools and body intelligence, and this is where true mastery is shown. If you observe a Japanese farmer working, if you have the opportunity to watch for a whole day, you will immediately notice how little energy they waste. Every movement is precise, economical, effective. Not an extra step, not a tool change without reason, not an unnecessary stretch or bend. Everything flows. It looks like a dance, a choreography perfected over decades. In Japan, there are tools barely known in the West but which revolutionize work. The nirigama, a hand hoe with a sharp, curved blade, removes weeds with a single pulling motion. You push the flat blade under the root, pull, and the weed comes out, root and all, without back pain from bending, without blisters from dull tools. One movement, one weed. The hori, a multi-purpose knife with one sharp side and one serrated side. One side for soft soil and the other for roots. It digs, cuts, divides, plants, and harvests, all in one tool. You don't need 5 different tools for 5 different tasks. You need one, and you master it. These tools are not just practical. They are the expression of a philosophy. Less force, more precision. Less time, more yield. Less waste, more respect. Japanese garden tools are often hand-forged, with high-quality steel, razor-sharp, balanced, and ergonomic. They are expensive, yes, but they last a lifetime. They are inherited. They are investments, not consumer goods, and they change the way you work. With the right tool, hard work becomes light, tedious work satisfying, slow work efficient. Japanese farmers often work squatting or kneeling close to the ground. To Western eyes, this seems exhausting, uncomfortable, but it's the opposite. It allows them to see each plant individually, up close in detail. They see pests before they spread. They see sick plants before the disease infects the entire bed. They see which plant needs more water, which should be fertilized, which is ready for harvest. This closeness to the soil creates connection, and connection creates knowledge. They know every plant in their garden, not as a category, but as an individual. This plant grows faster. This one needs more attention. This one is ready for tomorrow. This isn't romanticism, it's practical intelligence. It's the difference between a gardener who grows plants and a gardener who knows plants. And it's why their gardens are so productive. Because they don't just work, they observe, learn, adapt. A little wiser every day, a little better every day. That's the secret. The sixth principle is the integration of verticality, the third dimension of horticulture. Japanese farmers don't just think in 2 dimensions, not just in length and width, in rows and distances. They think in 3 dimensions. They use height. They use the airspace above the ground with the same intensity as the ground itself. While Western gardeners work the soil and leave the upper space empty, Japanese farmers also utilize that space. They build trellises for cucumbers, tall trellises 2 meters, 2.5 meters high. Cucumbers climb upwards, growing vertically instead of horizontally, saving space, receiving more light, more air circulation, and fewer fungal diseases. The fruits hang freely, don't get dirty, and are easy to harvest. Underneath the cucumber structure, lettuce grows in semi-shade, or spinach, or radishes. The soil is not empty, it is used doubly. Beans and peas climb poles, ropes, or nets. They don't need 1 square meter of soil per plant. They need 10 centimeters of soil and 1 meter of height. That is spatial efficiency. Tomatoes are not put in cages where they expand and waste space. They are guided upwards with strings strictly vertically, a single main stem, removing all side shoots. It sounds radical, but it works wonderfully. The plant puts all its energy into that single stem, into fruits instead of leaves. It grows 3 meters high, sometimes 4. It produces more tomatoes per square meter of soil surface than a wide, sprawling plant, and harvesting is easier. Neighbors. You walk along the row. You see each tomato, you pick it ripe, without searching through the dense foliage, without forgotten fruits rotting. Pumpkins climb roofs, sheds, pergolas. Their heavy fruits hang securely in nets, while the plant spreads upwards. This is not only practical, it's also beautiful. A roof full of pumpkin plants with yellow flowers and green fruits is a joyous sight and utilizes space that would otherwise be wasted. However, verticality doesn't just mean climbing supports, it also means stratification. The concept of the food forest, perhaps the most sophisticated form of horticulture that exists. In a traditional Japanese food forest, there isn't just one level, but 7. The forest canopy with fruit trees, apple, pear, plum, cherry. The low tree level with hazelnuts, elderberries, and smaller fruit trees. The shrub layer with currants, gooseberries, raspberries, blackberries. The herbaceous layer with vegetables, herbs, and flowers. The ground cover level with strawberries, squash, and creeping plants. The rhizosphere level with potatoes, onions, carrots, everything that grows underground. And the vertical level with beans, vines, hops. Each layer utilizes a different zone of the available space. Each layer captures light at a different height. Each layer produces food, and together they create a system that produces more than the sum of its parts. A 100 square meter food forest can produce as much as a traditional 500 square meter vegetable garden. It's not an exaggeration, it's reality. It's measurable. And it's the future of horticulture for everyone who needs to produce a lot in a small space. Now everything starts to connect. Now you see that it's not a single technique that makes Japanese farmers successful. It's not just bokashi, nor just polyculture, nor just dense planting. It's the interaction, it's the synergy, it's the system. Dense planting only works with good soil care, because many plants in a small space need many nutrients. Soil care only works with correct water management, because microorganisms need moisture, but not waterlogging. Water management only works with mulching and stratification, because otherwise too much would evaporate. Stratification only works with polyculture, because otherwise diseases would spread. And polyculture only works with observation and understanding, because you have to know which plants fit together and which don't. Each element reinforces the other, and together they create a system that sustains itself, heals itself, and improves year after year. It doesn't get worse. That is the fundamental difference between Western and Japanese horticultural philosophy. In the West, we often try to control nature, dominate it, force it. We fertilize with chemicals because we think we have to give the plant what it needs. We spray against pests because we think we have to kill them to protect our plants. We fight weeds because we think they are the enemy. We see the garden as a battlefield, and we are soldiers. Japanese farmers work with nature, not against it. They create conditions under which plants thrive on their own. They build soil so rich that fertilizer becomes unnecessary. They attract beneficial insects, ladybugs, parasitic wasps, predatory mites, hoverflies, which control pests naturally, without a single drop of poison. They accept a certain amount of weeds because they know that they also play a role. They cover the soil, feed insects, create diversity. They see the garden as an ecosystem, as a living organism, and they are not soldiers, but gardeners in the original sense, guardians, companions, partners of nature, and precisely for this reason, their gardens are more resilient, productive, and sustainable. A system that works with nature can function for centuries. A system that works against nature collapses sooner or later. We see it in industrial agriculture. Soils that have been treated with chemical fertilizers for decades are dead. They no longer contain microorganisms, nor earthworms, nor life. They are just a medium, a substrate that supports plants while we keep them artificially alive. These soils produce food, yes, but food of worse quality, poorer in nutrients, poorer in flavor, poorer in life. Japanese soils that have been biologically cultivated for centuries are more alive today than they were 100 years ago. They are darker, richer, more fertile. They smell of life and they produce food that not only satisfies but also nourishes, heals, and strengthens. You can put all these principles into practice immediately. Today, not next week or next year. Today you don't need a large plot. 2 square meters are enough to start. Neighbors, you don't need expensive tools. A good hand trowel, a weeding hoe, and a knife are enough. You don't need years of training. You only need the willingness to think differently, to observe, learn, and adapt. Start small. Choose a single raised bed. If you don't have a garden, use a large pot on the balcony. If you don't have a balcony, a windowsill. Try dense planting with polyculture. Plant tomatoes and, between them, basil and lettuce. Observe what happens. Start with bokashi or a simple compost. Get a bucket. Collect your kitchen scraps. Ferment them. Use them. See the difference. Mulch regularly. Every time you cut the grass, put a thin layer around your plants. Every time leaves fall, make the most of them. Don't waste anything. Everything is a resource. Observe what works and what doesn't. Keep a garden journal. Note when you planted what, when it germinated, when you harvested, what grew well, what grew poorly. Why? Next year you'll know more, make fewer mistakes, have more success, and be better each season. Every year your garden will be more productive, and after 2 or 3 years, you'll look back and hardly believe how much you can get from so little space. You'll understand why Japanese farmers harvest 3 times faster, because they work 3 times smarter. But it's about more than yield, much more. It's about independence. It's about knowing you can feed yourself and your family. No matter what happens, whether prices go up or down, supply chains function or collapse, the supermarket is full or empty, you have food, fresh, healthy food, grown by you. That is security, real security. Not the illusion of security offered by a full bank account, which might be worthless tomorrow, but the real security offered by a full garden that feeds you today, tomorrow, and next week. It's about the deep satisfaction of creating something with your own hands that gives life. There are few things in modern life as satisfying as the moment you pick a tomato you've grown yourself, from seed to fruit. The moment you cut a lettuce you planted 4 weeks ago. The moment you understand that you are not helpless, that you are capable, that you have control over something as fundamental as your food. That gives self-confidence, gives pride, gives meaning, and it's about transmitting this knowledge to the next generation, so they don't forget how to be self-sufficient. Our children grow up in a world where food comes from the supermarket. They don't know how a potato grows. They've never planted a bean. They've never seen how a plant emerges from a seed, how a fruit comes from a flower, how food comes from labor. That is dangerous. It's dependence. It's vulnerability. If you teach your children to grow food, you're giving them a gift more valuable than money. You give them skills, knowledge, independence, and the certainty that no matter what happens, they will be able to survive. The world is changing fast, faster than many believe. Crises come and go. Economic crises, energy crises, climate crises. Prices rise dramatically. Supply becomes more insecure. Geopolitical tensions threaten global trade flows. What is obvious today may be a luxury tomorrow. What is cheap today may be unaffordable tomorrow. But a well-managed garden is constant. Fertile soil is a security that no one can take away from you. And the knowledge of how to create it, how to care for it, how to use it is priceless. It is the most valuable capital you can possess. Japanese farmers have demonstrated for centuries that you don't need a lot of land to produce a lot. They have shown that quality is more important than quantity, that intensity is more important than area, that knowledge is more important than resources. In tiny plots, they have not only survived, but thrived, fed families, supplied communities, created culture. All on areas that in the West would be considered too small, even to start. All that is needed is the right knowledge and the will to apply it. This knowledge is now yours. I have given it to you. Not as theory, but as practice. Not as a possibility, but as a guide. All you need is the first step, the first action, the first decision. And that step is simpler than you think. It costs almost nothing, takes almost no time, but it changes everything. If this video has helped you, if you now see more clearly what is possible, if you have understood that self-sufficiency is not a utopia, but a decision, then subscribe to this channel. Neighbors. This isn't about entertainment. This is about knowledge that can change your life, about techniques that work, about proven principles, about a community of people who understand that true security doesn't lie in systems that control us, but in skills we master. Share this knowledge with people for whom independence is important, with your family, your friends, your neighbors. Every person who watches this video is one more who understands, one more who acts, one more who becomes independent. Write in the comments which of these methods you'll try first: bokashi, polyculture, dense planting, or vertical gardening. Tell us about your experiences, your successes, your challenges. Let's build a community of people who not only talk but act, of people who understand that true security isn't in a bank balance, nor in government promises, nor in the hope that everything will turn out well, but in the soil beneath our feet and in the knowledge in our heads. The time to start is now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. Now, at this very moment. Because every day you wait is a day without harvest. Every week that passes is a week your soil doesn't improve. Every season you let go by is a season without learning, without growing, without progressing. Your garden awaits you, your soil waits to come alive, your plants wait to grow, and your future waits for you to take it into your hands. Start now. Start little by little, but start. And in a year, you'll look back and be grateful you did. If this story has changed your view on the hidden treasures in your garden, subscribe to our channel and give us a like. We unearth the history and knowledge that others tried to bury. Sow the seeds of your own future.